So the story and history I'm about to tell comes mostly from the Unitarian Universalist Association's curriculum and history web pages, in particular, a piece by Reginald Zatoli. The Flower Communion Service was created by Norbert Capek, who founded the Unitarian Church in Czechoslovakia. He introduced this special service to that church on June 4th in 1923. Norbert understood the people he served. He too was raised Roman Catholic in Czechoslovakia. He was an acolyte in his youth, but he became disillusioned by the inconsistency in what was said versus what was done by the priest of his church. And when he was living in Vienna as an apprentice to his uncle, a tailor, he resigned from the Roman Catholic Church when he was 19, and he was baptized as a Baptist. His religious impulse was strong, and he founded almost a dozen churches from Ukraine to Budapest. He studied religion, and through research, he found the history of free Christian faith that he was convinced was native to his people. This faith, he discovered, had Bohemian and Moravian roots. His findings solidified his belief that neither Catholicism nor the Baptist Church reflected what was in his heart. He wrote a paper describing the roots of his faith as valuing the spiritual life above any other religious dogma and teachings, kind of like what Doug was talking about as he introduced why they were attracted to Michael Servetus Society. After years of leadership and participation in the International Association for Religious Freedom, IARF, which was founded in the 1900s by Unitarians, he left the Baptist ministry. In his diary, he wrote, "I cannot be a Baptist anymore, even in compromise. The fire of new desire, new words is burning inside me." 2 years later, he and his wife, Maya, joined a Unitarian church in Orange, New Jersey, where his grown children attended. Only a few years later, he and Maya returned to Czechoslovakia, and they started a school of religious science, which trained students for church leadership. He wrote curriculum on religious history and philosophy, which was taught in Prague public schools. It's not unusual for for religion to be taught in public schools. When I was in Transylvania, they also had religion taught in their public schools as one of the classes. He was a leader in the religious movement in Prague, a city that had a Unitarian church with, get this, 3,200 members. It was the largest in the world at that time. He, along with a medical doctor, sponsored an extensive counseling program out of the church. They had classes for people experiencing grief, who needed conflict resolution, marriage counseling, and support for newly expected parents. They were certainly ahead of their time. Capek also served a small church on the outskirts of Prague. The building was not so much like a church. It had no bells and no spires. It had no stained glass windows. It had no organ to make beautiful music. It didn't even have a piano. It had no carvings of wood or statues of stone. It had no candles or chalices. It had no flowers. The church did have some things. It had 4 walls and a ceiling and a floor. It had a door and a few windows, and it had some wooden chairs, but that was all. It was plain and simple. Every Sunday, Minister Capek went to the church and he spoke to people while they listened, sitting quietly in those hard wooden chairs. And when he was done speaking, the people talked a little bit among themselves and then they went home. That was all. There wasn't any music or candles or food, not even coffee or treats. Springtime came to the city of Prague and Norbert Capek went out for a stroll. The rains had come, like today, and the birds were singing and the flowers were blooming all over the land. The world was beautiful. And then the idea came to him, simple and clear, plain as day. The next Sunday, he asked all the people in the church to bring a flower or a budding branch or even a twig. Each person was to bring one. "What kind?" they asked. "What color? What size?" "You choose," he said. Each of you choose what you like. And so on the next Sunday, which was the very first day of summer, The people came with flowers of all different colors and sizes and kinds. There were yellow daisies and red roses. There were white lilies and blue asters and dark-eyed pansies and light green leaves, pink and purple, orange and gold. There were all the colors and more. Flowers filled all the vases, and the church wasn't so plain and simple anymore. Minister Capek spoke to the people while they listened, sitting quiet and still on those hard wooden chairs. These flowers are like ourselves, he said. Different colors and different shapes and different sizes, each needing different kinds of care, but each beautiful and important and special in its own way. When he was done speaking, the people talked a little among themselves, and then they were to choose a different flower from the vases before they went home. And that was all. And it was beautiful, plain and simple as the day. Capek not only thought adults were beautiful in their uniqueness, he also brought that belief to children. Capek wrote of 5 fundamental feelings and abilities which religious education should elicit from a child. They feel fitting today as we celebrate our religious education teachers. They are the ability to have faith and confidence, the ability to hope, the feeling of worship, where there is space to open up and have an experience of the reverence for life, charity or selfless love, and conscientiousness. These, he said, are the qualities that characterize what he truly saw as a religious person. History said that it was during her tour of the United States that Maya introduced the flower communion in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Unfortunately, Maya was unable to return to Prague due to the outbreak of World War II. And it wasn't until the war was over that Norbert Capek's death in a Nazi concentration camp was revealed. As an advocate for religious freedom and progressive education, he was seen as a threat to the Nazis who occupied his homeland. He was picked up by the Gestapo and sent to Dachau, where he was killed. This simple service, the communion inspired by the sight of flowers surrounding that little church, represented more to Capek and the people who were participating. Just like those of us who gather today, they recognized the gift of religious freedom. They found a religious home with theological diversity that was grounded in a call to a genuine life of faith, hope, worship, love, and conscientiousness. That simple act of communion, a word that comes from the Latin root of communioin, meaning fellowship, mutual participation or sharing, it was a radical act, and it still is in this dark time of history. We too must stay open, looking for ways to commune across differences that divide and ways to celebrate that which is beloved and sacred. From that prison cell in Dresden, Capek wrote of a holy enthusiasm seizing the heart. How when that happens, your face lights up and you feel like a star singing. Your very soul, hearing your song, is radiant, he said. He wrote of enthusiasm blooming once more, clouds disappearing and the sun's rays bringing the earth back to life. His words were as powerful today as they were back then. He wrote, "The sun of your hope will shine again along the dangerous narrows of your life, bringing warmth and light and the air of freedom, peace, and happiness. Courage will be astir in the air and prompt you to action. You would embrace the whole world, have peace, touch every flower. You would like to give yourself away completely to everybody, forgive everything, play host to everyone. You would lift this earth to heaven. It was, and it will be again." Capek lost his life for his beliefs, and we remain free to express ours. I urge all of us to actively use that right so that the beauty of this earth is preserved and the unique inherent worth and dignity of each and every one of us who longs just like us is protected and able to thrive versus simply survive. Before I move into a time of reflection together, I'd like to ask those of you who brought a flower or a picture of a flower or are wearing something flowerish to make them visible on the screen so we can see them. And if you would take the focus off of me, I'd like to keep recording and just let people see the flowers that people brought. Mine's on my shirt. If you put your view as speaker view, you will see a whole range of folks on your screen. Thank you for sharing that beauty. So yesterday, our family logged on to the Wichita State website and we watched a few graduation speakers. Quentin, our oldest son, received a Master of Education in Exercise Science, and each of those speakers opened by acknowledging how extraordinarily hard and challenging these times are. We hear about these times in the news and from friends and families and in our own heads and hearts. It's not just the backdrop of our days, but it will be the foreground of the months and months to come. Humans need a sense of purpose and meaning to carry on. Each of us is trying to find our way through these days in whichever way we can. And I want us to, on this rainy spring morning, when the trees and flowers around us are starting to bloom, I want us to think of the hope and the longer view that Capek embodied. So let me just read back those lyrics of the song sung by Dr. Rideout. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. So today, instead of a normal flower communion ritual where we would place all of our flowers in these large vases on the chancel and later have a chance for our children to gather bunches and pass them out to us in the pews, instead we're going to break into small groups so we can converse with one another. When you gather, I'd like you to consider what is opening or coming to life for you during this time. What is that little flicker of hope or newness? What is coming to life or opening for you at this time?